So there is some hope for these folks that it won't be taken out from underneath them. We're being very transparent and looking to do helping the affordability for these folks.
Correct. Those are the conversations we've had with WIN. We haven't talked to this new group yet, and as we get closer to it, we'll find out whether WIN is actually going to move forward on that $37.5 million purchase price.
Thank you, Mr. Billings. Thank you, Chairman.
Councilor Melville.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Through you to Mr. Bellavance, when they said $5 to $7 million, was that a grant or a loan, or what was the thought on that?
They mentioned, and we talked about several different funding sources using community preservation funding. We have funding available through our affordable housing fund, which was when we had buyouts for inclusionary zoning. They talked about a possible TIF. They talked about CDBG funding as well. They talked about borrowing money. So there was several different areas that they were looking at.
Yeah, I know, and they're very, I mean, they're one of the larger operations, if I remember correctly, when researching them and when they came up. This other company, this True North, you had indicated that they have not kind of stated their intentions. Is that correct? So we don't know if they would keep it or if they're going to go, if their goal long term is to get it market rate in 3 years, right? Is that the case?
Correct. We haven't talked to them, so we're not sure what their intentions are.
Is there anything legally preventing you from, I know because WIN is the preferred state company to purchase this. Is there anything legally preventing us from communicating with them before this transaction occurs, or are we, the reason I say that is maybe we could, if there's a discussion of a grant or using community preservation money for this particular company, and we find out, well, the other company would have, their intention is to keep it, status quo and use their own money. I mean, that could be something that would obviously be a preferable situation. I mean, I understand that by the economics of it make it appear as if, no, they're going to go market rate just because they so overbid the company that is being preferred by the state. Is there anything preventing us from communicating with them?
No, definitely not. So I'm sure we'd want to communicate with them and make sure that, find out what their intentions are. They may be seeking funding from us as well. And try to draw that balance between them and what WIN was thinking about.
I'll finish up on this, Chairman, is, it just seems like we're assuming based on the bid that they made that this is the case, and we're right now, it seems like we have one party that is communicating with us and the other one, we're just making assumptions based on the actual amount of money that they're willing to spend for this particular property. So thank you very much.
Councilor Rosignol, are you back in?
Yes. Just to follow up, thank you. Just to follow up on Councilor Melville's questions. So you do have intention to follow up with True North Capital to find their intentions of what that property, if they were to outbid WIN?
Yes, yes.
Will that be relatively timely?
Yeah, hopefully. I'll try to get as much information as we can as soon as possible. Yeah.
Thank you, Councilor Rosignol. And September 30th is the date in which you will have a definitive answer upon whether WIN accepted the counteroffer, correct?
Correct.
So we want to focus on the September 30th date, and we'll keep this in committee and get them back here. Councilor Turco.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Mr. Bellavance. If I'm not mistaken, and Councilor McGinn may correct me, I think we have $600,000 in CPC monies for affordable housing. Is it?
That's through you, Madam Chairperson, to Councilor Turco. That is roughly correct based on what has been allocated for affordable, but there is other monies available in CPC that could be put into affordable housing. So that's the number that you have in mind is not necessarily the maximum. It's just what's been allocated based on the annual distributions that are done every year and what has accumulated and not been used thus far. So that's the number that you're thinking of.
Thank you very much. And also, Mr. Bellavance, the Affordable Housing Trust, how much is in that? Do we know the number?
I'm going to try to remember. It was either about 750, 800,000, roughly around there.
And then if we did a TIF, do you know what, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, do you know what the tax bill is annually on this property that we would?
It would certainly go up if it went for 37 million, but I don't know what the tax bill is.
I'm just wondering, I mean, the reason I ask is I'm wondering if we're being realistic, if we can come up with the $5 to $7 million. It seems pretty good that there is some money available, but I'm wondering if between the Affordable Housing Trust and the CPC and a tax incentive financing, if that accumulates to the $5 million that we need to come up with to assist with this project. And if so, and it's realistic, then that's great news. I'd like to be like Councilor Gould and be positive about it, but I just want to make sure before I'm too positive that the money's actually there. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Turco. If I could, I was contacted, Congressman Moulton's office was contacted due to this, this matter, and I was contacted today by that office saying that there would be a representative here. So there is one here. Great. Would you like to come up and make a statement, or no? Sure. Would you mind coming up to the podium and enter your name and position into the record and make a comment? Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks for having me. My name is Michael Devin, District Rep for Congressman Seth Moulton's office. We as an office take a stance that we support any of the efforts with the city wants to make in supporting the state in order to help alleviate the affordable housing at the Tannery Apartments. It was our understanding that there was also a third potential candidate that was working in this regard. I'm not sure if there's any information that's come about from that, if I have the most up-to-date, but my understanding it was Harbor Lights was initially, and then they were removed from it from the state, and then it moved on to the Wynn development, and then from there, Wynn is asking for more money, but Harbor Lights was notified that there was potentially a third entity. I don't know enough information about it. We were trying to get more information on that, but if there's anything we can do to support.
We appreciate you coming here this evening and offering support. Kurt, did you have any information on Harbor Light? That name was kicked around, I think, at our last meeting, I think, right? Harbor Light?
So the state DHCD had sent us the information back, I think February was the first time we were contacted, and basically asked us if we were interested in a preferred developer, and we did send a letter in support of Harbor Light as the one to do that. But the state ended up going with Wynn Development, and the reasoning they told us was they thought they had more capacity to handle a large project like that.
Right, so you were aware of that and you did apprise the council of it, and thank you for reminding us that you did address that. Did you want to make one last comment, Councilman McGinn?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairperson, not on the committee, but thanks for allowing the comment. I just wanted to very quickly add that Representative Walsh has also been very actively engaged in this whole process and bringing the state resources to bear. So I think that everybody here is looking for an assurance that everything that can be done is done in the compressed time frame that we have, and based on my involvement in the situation, it appears that's the case. I think community development's doing a fine job. We are up against a tight timeline here, but it won't be for lack of effort by a number of parties that are going after this, and I applaud you, Madam Chairperson, for keeping this on everybody's radar so that the council is fully appraised in a timely manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. And with that, we will leave this matter in committee, and we will anxiously await September 30th, and we will set up another meeting so you can apprise us of the situation. And I thank you. I echo Councilor McGinn's remarks that we really appreciate the input, the hard work, and the community effort to do the right thing here for our residents and for the city. So thank you very much. And so we'll keep this in committee. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Oh, excuse me, we do have another item. Thank you. That's correct. Yes, then thank you very much. So we'll move on to our next item, which is pest issues that have been raised in the city. And this is a follow-up meeting, and Sharon Cameron was kind enough to follow up with us. And regarding the coyotes, I know that we've been searching for an expert to guide us and come to a meeting, but we have not been able to find or secure one as of yet. So Councilor O'Neill, I know this was your issue. Were there some comments you'd like to make on this? And as we continue to look for an expert to come forward?
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. I just add that it is hard to get people, especially they have day jobs in their facilities, but what I'd recommend is, at least for, online, we can post some stuff from Mass Wildlife, which talks about some basic stuff about coyotes with, descriptions of habitats and what to do, in fact, if there's any interactions with them, especially with children or whatnot. And, gives basic information that I found helpful. But Mass Wildlife is probably the best organization we can try. I didn't reach out to them. That's my own fault. But I put this in March, so I guess it just caught me by surprise. So we can look further into it. Thanks.
Sure. Would you like to, under the suspension of the rules, enter that into record and we can get that on the website?
Please. Thanks.
All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote. Tim, you get that up? Thank you. Okay, Tim will put that up. Thank you very much. And then we will move on to our final pest control issue on tonight's agenda. And Sharon Cameron, if you'd be so kind to give us an update on all the work that you've been doing since we raised this issue several months ago. I know you've been hard at work addressing it, and you have very, very brief presentation on the rat issue in the city. So again, I thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting me back. I did a much lengthier presentation on rodent issues earlier this year, so I'm not going to repeat that, but I did want to share with you some current data about the number of rodent complaints we've received in the city, and you can see it's been a very challenging year, even higher numbers than last year citywide, with Ward 1 having the highest number of complaints in the city. Next. So our response activities include distributing educational materials in the neighborhoods where we've received complaints. And this season and last season, we've hit over 150 streets in the city with educational materials. That's a really important part of the rodent control effort. It's really, I'll explain a little bit more about it, but we really do need the cooperation of residents and businesses throughout the city to help us address this issue. We also conduct code enforcement. In the course of blanketing the neighborhoods with educational materials, the inspectors also look for properties where conditions indicate they might be providing food sources or harborage for rodents. And when it's appropriate to do so, we usually try to work in a cooperative fashion with the property owner first, educate them about why the conditions create a problem, but when we need to, we will issue either tickets or we'll issue formal enforcement orders for things such as overgrown vegetation, the way the trash is being stored on the property, accumulation of debris. This year, since January, we've issued 18 tickets and 42 enforcement actions for nuisance conditions. We also have a pest control contractor that the city works with. when we've done the education, we've done the code enforcement, we continue to have issues in the neighborhood, we contract with A1 Pest Control to go out and make recommendations for baiting in the neighborhood. And I put up the list of neighborhoods that they have hit this year. But one of the points I wanted to make, and this is really very important, every single service report I've received this year from the exterminator shows that the rodents have not been taking the bait out of the bait boxes. And what that means is the rodents have another food source, and those food sources are on people's properties. And so that's why the answer to this problem is not just more pest control, it's really managing sources of food in the environment. And then lastly, the response activity that we have done is we have incorporated requirements for pest control into our comments on planning board approvals, and also the purchasing agent has incorporated them into the bid specifications for any city projects. So the council had requested that I do some research and propose an ordinance to address the rodent problem, and I have done a lot of research to see what other communities have done. I found some things that I think are best practice. I have drafted a proposed ordinance which I will be ready to share with the council within the next few weeks. I have run this. I mentioned to you the last time I was here that the 8 North Shore communities are collaborating on pest control, and we have contracted with a pest control expert to help us develop a plan. That contractor has reviewed this proposed ordinance and made some recommendations to strengthen it. But basically there are 3 components of the ordinance I'd like to highlight. One is stricter requirements for the way we manage trash and recyclables in the community, including requirements for covered containers, including requirements for property owners to remove trash barrels from the curb after pickup and clean up any debris left behind. There's a very strong prevention component in the proposed ordinance, and it would call for certain types of projects that are permitted in the city to integrate, have an integrated pest management plan in order to get a permit. So these are the type of activities that could potentially generate rodent activity, either because they're disturbing habitat or because they're creating conditions that could provide food. And there are things, certain types of building projects, certain types of development projects, street openings and utility projects, food establishments, dumpster permits, permits for landfills, transfer stations, and vehicles that haul waste through the city, and people who hold animal permits. So there would be requirements, proactive requirements for them to think about pest control as a condition of getting a permit. And I want to acknowledge the other city departments have been very cooperative in working with me and recognizing that we all have pieces of addressing this because of the type of activities we permit. And then the third piece of the proposed ordinance is a mitigation piece. And this is a proposal that would call for some of these activities to pay into a mitigation fund, which would be used strictly to fund rodent control activities when needed. So there would be a proposal that a small additional fee be placed on certain types of permits. The fee would be set by the council, and that would be a dedicated funding to allow us to do coordinated pest control in response to concerns raised by these type of projects. And I've talked about integrated pest management plans, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of detail about what that would include. The proposed ordinance would call for these plans to be implemented a minimum of 2 weeks prior to the projects, and they would include things like who the pest control operator is, so no do-it-yourselfers. There would have to be an initial survey by the pest control operator to document whether there are rodents or signs of activity, burrows, identifying sanitation conditions that could lead to a rodent problem, both on the site and any public areas adjacent to the site. In addition, they'd have to provide us detail about rodent control measures that they would implement, including the types of and locations of traps, bait stations, how frequently they'll be monitored, how they'll be removing leftover bait and any rodent carcasses, how are they going to train their staff to be aware of signs of rodent activity, and who do they report that to, How are they going to manage the site to make sure that they're not providing sources of food, water, or harborage? And who is the designated point person to receive and respond to complaints from the neighborhood? So that would be the minimum contents of an IPM plan. And then lastly, just to conclude, you've seen this before, but this is the educational flyer we leave out in the neighborhood. And it's really, I can't overstate the role of residents in working with us to address this. They really need to work on eliminating sources of food, water, and harborage on their own properties to assist us in addressing this problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And again, you've done a lot of work, and that's a very comprehensive plan that you're putting forward. And I know it has not been reviewed and been given the seal of approval by a few more departments. So I appreciate you coming tonight to keep us apprised of what you're doing. I'm sure Councilor Turco, would you have some comments?
Thank you very much, Madam Chairwoman. Yeah, Sharon, first of all, I have to say thank you. It's amazing. I read the ordinance yesterday, and it's unbelievable the work that you've put in a short period of time. And I did speak to Al Tellerico, the building commissioner, and he's, like you said, very on board with this. But what I did want to address is the complaints went away for a little while, and I was actually feeling pretty good. And they seem to, in the last couple of weeks, come back. And particularly one resident yesterday told me in the past week in the Linfield Street area that he's got 13 rats in the week on his property. And he came to me, and unlike most residents, he didn't ask for your help. He asked me if I could spread the word through the neighborhood, because I live on Linfield Street, to have neighbors help, because he's a big believer that, yes, if we all do it, then we'll eliminate the problem. So again, to reiterate what you said, I do believe that everybody needs to help with this situation, and that's what works. I think the Rainbow Road residents, Rainbow Circle are a prime example. They've all, for the most part, I think there's still a couple of problem areas, but for the most part have all chipped in. More recently, this morning, I actually got a few that I will call you tomorrow for in the pumping station area, and they may have already contacted you. But that issue is back near the cemetery also. But the one question I did have is, at some point during the summer, a resident called and he had a rat trapped on the public street under a bucket. And it was after business hours, and the animal control wasn't available. DPW doesn't deal with live animals. I did call Jeff Weisberg from A1 Exterminators. He was willing to send somebody out. They didn't have somebody that was available at that time, but he did try for me. But my question to you is, what would a resident do, or a city councilor, that gets that call at 6 or 7 p.m. that there is a rat in a public way, and how do we address it?
I don't actually know the answer to that question, so I will have to research that and let you know.
Yeah,
We'll leave that question in committee.
I will. I'd be willing to leave that there, but just food for thought, because you all may get that happen at some point. But again, thank you for all your help with this, and I appreciate it. And I think the ordinance, as it stands, is great.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Rossignol?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Excellent job, very comprehensive, and I really appreciate the feedback and all of the steps that you're going to try to combat this issue. I noticed that you mentioned that you issued 18 tickets and 42 enforcement ordinances. How many have you enforced the previous years? I know that was just this year, since January, correct?
I didn't pull the data for previous years, but that's pretty typical.
So it hasn't increased or spiked at all?
It has gone up a little bit because the number of complaints we've received has gone up, but we typically do issue a lot of nuisance complaints. The ticket numbers are probably higher than they have been, because usually we don't try to take a punitive approach. We try to take more of an educational approach, but because we've had so many issues, we have issued more tickets than usual. So the enforcement orders are probably similar, but the tickets would be higher.
And are you finding the same, you're going to the same areas or the same residents to enforce?
Yeah, almost everybody who has a ticket is a repeat offender, because we don't usually do that unless we've got somebody who hasn't been cooperative.
Right, so to Councilor Turco's point, if you have half of a neighborhood that's willing and ready and able and in trying to combat this problem, and you have one resident or one business or one person where they're all obviously going to, where all the rodents are going to head, it's really, you're you know, fighting a losing battle because they have a safe harbor to always go to. So I love the fact that you're working on an ordinance so that everything can be in a conformed sort of manner, and I absolutely love the component of a pest plan for new permits. So when you have a new development and they're going to vacate a former wooded area, you know, wildlife is going to go places. So there needs to be a plan in place. So I appreciate your hard work and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Sasslaw and Councilor McGinn for final comments, because we're running over. Thank you.
Thank you. I just, for my own purposes and maybe for the public, Sharon, can you just talk about what the difference between a ticket enforcement order and why we'd get one versus the other? I'm not really familiar with it.
So an enforcement order is a formal letter that tells you, we did a site visit based on a complaint, we identified these conditions on your property, we're giving you X period of time to clean it up, depending on, you know, the extent of the issue. Usually for these type of conditions, we would give them either 14 or 30 days to fix, and then if they don't fix it, you know, the penalties would potentially include us going over to the district court and file an application for a criminal complaint. So that's kind of a lengthy process, and most of those don't result in formal criminal complaints, but usually people respond to an order. We tend to issue tickets with, almost everybody who's gotten a ticket is somebody who's gotten an enforcement order once before and didn't comply with it, or they maybe did comply with it, but the problem has reoccurred, and so we're not going to go through that route anymore. So we're going to start hitting them. The first ticket is $100, subsequent tickets are $300. So, you know, sometimes that's what it takes to motivate people.
And what type of a, when the ticket's issued, what type of bite do we have to make sure we collect upon the ticket?
So if they don't pay the ticket within 21 days, we file an application over at the district court, and then we go through that whole court process.
And is it the same for a resident versus a business, what the process you just described?
It's the same, yep.
Okay. And I also want to thank you. You've been very receptive. You know, you basically, you know, when I get calls, you deal directly with the residents. I appreciate that. The only other question I had was on Route 1, we do have some transfer stations. Do you want those a little bit closer? Because those really are a breeding ground, in my opinion. I'm just curious what your thoughts on that is.
So one of the things we proposed in the ordinance is that the transfer stations and landfills would have to submit an integrated pest management plan to us on an annual basis. But one of the pieces I think that's important that hasn't been done before is that we would require vehicles that transport garbage through our city. It's called an offal permit, OFFAL. For those vehicles, because we have been told that, you know, those vehicles service many different cities and they often are infested with rodents, and you're transporting rodents into your city. They're not housed in Peabody, but we want to show, in order for us to give them a permit for them to travel our streets, we want to make sure that there's a treatment plan for wherever the vehicles are garaged. So I think that's a pretty big missing piece. There are about 38, let me just look at the number. There are, 28 different companies that we license to transport waste through our streets, and only a few of them are actually based here in Peabody. So I think that closes a gap.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Councilor McGinn, and then Councilor Charest for the final comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Again, it's you've heard it from multiple councilors, but your department's response to this has been, as it is with all issues, you know, handled in a professional manner, and you know, it's an unpleasant issue, and just the way that your department is dealing with it, it helps make it a little bit more tolerable. So thank you for that. You know, what I think might get lost here a little bit is that when you see those numbers going up, that adds to the burden on your department, and you know, this is probably not where we want to see you spending all your time. So I have, like Councilor Turco, had an opportunity to review the ordinance in its draft form, and I think it's excellent. I'm looking forward to seeing the finished product, and eager to act on it, because I'm hopefully that if we can get that in place, get people to understand the measures that they need to take, give you the tools that you need from an enforcement perspective, that can kind of maybe get us a little bit out of this reactive mode and more into a proactive stance that these pest management plans and so forth contemplate. So again, thank you for all your hard work on this and your leadership on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor McGinn. Councilor Charest.
Thank you. Again, like everyone else, I speak to you probably at least once or twice a week on this issue, and you've been fantastic. The public needs to know you've been working so hard. The other thing I just wanted to stress to people, if they do receive one of these flyers, okay, it's not a marketing flyer from any company. It's from the Board of Health. And if you're getting one at your door, there's a reason why you're getting it at your door. Pay attention to it. Look at it, read it, follow it. I had discussions with Sharon, and some people taking it as a flyer from a company, a window company type of thing, going door to door, passing them out. It's not. It's from the Board of Health, and there's a strong reason why you're getting that. Look at it, pay attention, do what it says, call the department here for any more help. But again, it's so many people say, well, I haven't seen any. Just because you haven't seen them doesn't mean they're not there. They are there. They're throughout the neighborhood, and you got to take the approach that we need as a whole to combat this issue. So again, just pay attention to the literature that comes to your door, follow through, work with your neighbors, and we can certainly hopefully get this under control. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. And I cannot deny the longest-serving councilor from Ward 3, Councilor Mitsoulas.
Thank you, Lady Chairman. I just wanted to congratulate you all also. You're on top of things, and I don't think the city or the residents need to worry. But I just wanted to bring you people back to the 50s and 60s when the tanneries were downtown, and it was in my neighborhood, and along the North River, the rats were everywhere. And it was not uncommon to have a rat in your yard. And back at the time, we had this fella called, Timmy probably remembers him, his name was Tony Koukouris, and he was known as the rat killer. So every time someone saw a rat in a yard, who would we call? We'd call Tony. So
Well, there's your answer, John.
So maybe, there you go. That's
Call Tony,
That's
the
the
rat
only
killer.
reason I brought that up. Maybe we could find a volunteer out there who, after hours, is willing to come and, and do a service for Mr. Turco. So.
Excellent. And with that, we'll keep this
Thank you.
matter in committee as well, so that we can get a final review of your ordinance that you put so much time in and received justified accolades. So with that, Councilor Melville, a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor, any opposed? It's a vote.